Hey everyone, this is Kyle with Simulation Lab here in Brooklyn, New York, and this is the first video in the Viral Art Review series. So during each video of this series, we're going to be looking at 3 different pieces of digital art from 3 different artists and discussing what was successful about each piece, what might have been done a little differently, and the potential of each of these pieces of art to go viral around the web. I appreciate all of you guys chiming in and checking out the video. It's a little different than my typical tutorials and stuff like that. But I think this could be a really interesting way to get a conversation started about viral internet art. So typically in these videos, what we're going to do is I have an 8-point list of criteria that we're going to be using to review each piece. So in a later video, we're going to break down the list in more detail and look at each point and see how you can reflect it back in your own work. So let's jump in. So the first piece that we're going to be reviewing today is by Real Imposter. And Real Imposter's actual name is Stephen Valté, and he's a 3D artist. And the piece that we're going to be looking at today is titled Free Sample. And the piece is pretty wild. So first on our list is creativity. So is this piece creative? I'd say hell yes. It's extremely creative. It definitely pushes the boundary of what you would expect to see in like a video on social media, and it's definitely not too safe because it definitely has a little bit of uncanniness to it, because it's a little strange, but it's definitely still pretty satisfying to watch, and it's a pretty wild ride when you watch it. I'd say it's not particularly following any trend. I'd say Extra Wedge does some similar stuff with like soft body dynamics and just like the little uncanny, but Real Imposter definitely has a style of his own, and this video fits right in to his overall body of work, which is our next point on our list, number 2, aesthetics and relevancy of this piece to the overall body of work from this artist. So if you look at Real Imposter's feed, definitely has a recognizable aesthetic to a lot of his pieces. Not a whole lot of shadow information that happens in a lot of his pieces, but there still is definitely like a photorealistic quality that happens in a lot of his pieces, regardless of the sort of like the characteristic lack of textural information or shadowing and depth and stuff like that. Still definitely realistic looking and feeling, which is definitely a style that he has, I believe. Number 3 on our list is artistic quality, use of lighting, texturing, and detail. As I've mentioned, there's definitely a minimal use of lighting and texturing in a lot of his animations, but there's definitely like some pretty significant detail when there is detail. So he definitely focuses on emphasizing particular details. Like for instance, something that I didn't notice right away is his hoodie is actually like this clear translucent plastic. Could have had a little bit of like chromatic aberration in that. That's just a part of like one of my criticisms I have of the hoodie itself. But his hat has fur on it, so that was definitely like either a displacement map on the hat itself, or maybe a little fur sim. The details in the character model's face, you can definitely like see the wrinkles in his sort of like jelly-like skin. So there's definitely quite a bit of detail here to be perceived after the second or third view of watching this loop. I'd say in general the lighting is a little flat. There could have been a little bit more emphasis on like the primary light, which I believe is on the upper right, like facing towards the character. It could have been a little bit brighter, and then maybe the secondary light behind the character could have been like a little bit like more of a wash light, or maybe could have used some ambient occlusion, or ambient lighting or global illumination or something. But that's just like in general. It could have been a little bit more specularity and reflection on the character's skin, but it definitely lends itself to being this like almost like rubber like silicone substance. So if that was what he was going for, he was definitely successful. Number 4 on the list is composition. The composition is great. The character is front and center. The ice cream cone falling into his face is definitely the primary focus of the image, which is great. So in terms of balance and composition, it's great. Use of space, there is a significant amount of empty space, which is really important in a piece like this, because you really want to focus on the subject itself, right? In any piece of art that isn't like a square composition for Instagram, right? You want the focus to be on the subject, right? So this piece definitely has that. Number 5 on the list is video quality and use of time. I think the use of time is great. Videos maybe 14 seconds long, something like that, maybe a little less. The video quality is great. There's no compression loss. Instagram didn't destroy the video. Typically, if you render and export out a higher resolution video, Instagram's compression algorithm will basically dither it and it'll kind of destroy it a little bit. This looks like it was definitely formatted in that 1080 by 1080 aspect ratio for Instagram specifically. So definitely good on his part to format that appropriately. The video is a loop and you can't tell where the seam is, so that's very important for loops. You really don't want to see that seam. You don't want to see any blank frames. Sometimes at the end of a loop there'd be like a black frame or something because the artist forgot to trim the sound appropriately or something. There's always some kind of blank frame, or you could tell there's like a transition as the loop goes over again, so you can't really tell where the loop is in this, which is really good. He did do quite a bit of work with getting that to loop correctly. As far as software goes, it looks like he used Houdini. Houdini has Vellum, which is a really awesome like cloth and soft body solver. So it definitely to do this in like any other software, maybe it could definitely be done in like softwares like Cinema 4D or like 3D Studio Max with Tyflow or something. But it's definitely super clean and very dynamic. So there's definitely, so you definitely use the right tool for the job here. As far as sound design goes, I think the sound is really visceral and kind of like a little bit grotesque, but also kind of satisfying in a strange, oddly satisfying way, right? And I think it works really well. It's a little bit amplified. It could have been like maybe taken a step back a little bit, like in terms of like it's kind of like gross viscerality, but I probably wouldn't change the sound design. I really love it. I think he did it himself. So number 8 in our list is the virality critique. What's the hook? I think the hook is when the black ice cream cone goes in the guy's mouth and starts to like kind of suck it in. It kind of like hesitates there for a second, and that takes about maybe 4 to 6 seconds in the video, which is really important because you really want the hook to be after that like 3-second mark in the video. For Instagram to count it as one view, right? So it really like draws people in to like continue watching the video after that initial 3 seconds. Then you get the hook. Oh, okay. Then you want to watch it again and again, right? So it's very important that the hook is after that like 3-second mark to keep you watching until the hook, right? So you definitely accomplish that. Continuing with the virality critique as far as details are concerned, there's definitely like smaller little minute details that you notice in terms of like the fur on the hat, the translucent hoodie, and then the ice cream, like kind of like the black ice cream, like dripping on his tongue and his chin and stuff. So there's definitely like some like smaller details and nuances here and there, and you notice like the really stark contrast between the eyes and the ice cream cone being black, and then the rest of the image being this like pink and orange, pink and yellow. So there's definitely like these small, minute details that you notice the second, third, fourth time of watching the video, which is really important. To keep people hooked and keep people watching it. In my sort of closing remarks on this piece is I would have liked to see some of the black ice cream goo maybe like drip like out of his mouth as the ice cream cone goes in, maybe like fly around the hand and kind of just become this a little bit more gross. I just want a little bit more like, I don't know, like a little bit more sloppy, I guess. I don't know. But that's just my personal opinion. I kind of do like how he was a little bit more reserved on using the liquid sim in that way. But in general, I think it's it's definitely like a great video. And thank you so much, Real Imposter Steven, for sharing this video. Okay, so the second piece that we're going to be reviewing today is another animation by Esteban Diacano. And Esteban does a lot of really interesting, really engaging work with like motion capture characters, and a lot of them have this sort of like jelly-like, blobby composition to them. It's kind of substance. Sometimes they're kind of cloth-like, sometimes they're kind of balloon-like. The piece that we're going to be reviewing today is called Careful, and his comment here is more shenanigans around the new neighborhood. I love this piece because it's really engaging. I mean, of course, all of his pieces have like really well composed lighting. The superimposition of the character into the live action footage is like remarkably clean. So overall, really love this piece. So let's break it down. So first up, creativity. Is this following a particular trend? I'd say with Esteban's work, yes it is. It's a little safe for Esteban, but he is like honing in his skills and developing this particular method of superimposing characters in live action footage. So the more you do a particular thing, the better you're just gonna get at it. So he's definitely mastered this. Number 2 on our list, which is aesthetics and its relevancy to Esteban's full body of work, definitely fits in his feed. It's definitely something. This video is definitely characteristic of the aesthetic language of Esteban's generally trying to produce. It's definitely consistent, and it's something that his particular audience would expect him to produce. In that regard, it's a little safe, but it's still, I mean, a lot of his work is extremely like experimental, and this piece is definitely probably one of those experimental pieces, just to hone down a particular new skill or you know, try out a new method of like playing around with some of the textural details in the character itself, stuff like that. So number 3 on our list is the artistic quality, the use of lighting, texturing, detail, color. We already covered some of these topics, but just another remark on the lighting. It looks like he really is there in the scene. One minor critique I have on the texture on the character itself. As the camera gets closer to the character, there could have been a little bit more depth in the texture on the character itself. As you know, because the camera gets super close to the character, and you start to see you see some of the, you know, the sort of like grain, the granularity in the fabric itself, and it could have been a little bit more fine displacement used there. Yeah, so the textures could have been a little bit more pronounced as the camera got closer to the character. That's my only critique on that. Number 4 on our list is composition. Character is front and center. The subject is front and center, right in the camera. Again, in terms of composition, as the character passes in front of the camera, it could have been more interesting if it was a little bit more dynamic play, where maybe if there was a collision object around the camera, and then like the simulation of a cloth on the character like went like through the camera or something, like around it or something, so you kind of felt like you were going between his blobs or something. That could have been a little bit more dynamic and exciting as the hook in the video. And then at the very tail end, where it kind of like pans around and kind of just looks at a face of a building, it's a little bit it leaves something a little bit more to be desired. But in general, the effort is there, like as the character comes toward the camera. That was like the main focus of the animation. So number 5 on our list is video quality and use of time. I think use of time is appropriate. The character's moving at a relative speed that you would expect like a human to walk. He's not some kind of like alien like creature that's, you know, like running after you or something. It's not that like shocking or scary. It's definitely kind of like a satisfying. He looks kind of like he's happy, you know. That's the emotion I get from this piece. It's just kind of like a you know, stroll down the hood, and you know, he's just kind of blobbing around and hanging out. So definitely like a satisfying emotion that I get from the video. Use of software. I think he used Cinema 4D for this, which is probably the right tool for the job here. Could have used Houdini or 3D Studio Max with Tyflow. I recommend that a lot. But for this, you know, it's a relatively simple, like, you know, like a dynamic cloth sim on the character itself. So definitely probably the right tool for the job. It seems like it worked, even though this can be done in other software. Number 7 is sound design. The sound itself is just taken at the ambiance of the street itself, like of the live action footage. Something a little bit left to be desired with the sound. I really wanted that sort of like visceral, like, what does that character sound like? Is he like blobby? Is he like jelly-like? Is he like making some kind of gooey noises, or is he like more soft, like a cloth are the blobs made of cloth? Is it like shh, shh, shh? You know, like what does it sound like? Is it? It could have been sandbags. It could have been anything. You know, like, but you don't really get that sense of like what the character is made of. Okay, so that leads me to number 8 of this piece, the virality critique. What's the hook in this video? I'd say the hook is probably as the character like comes toward the camera, like what is it going to do when it gets toward the camera? And it doesn't really do anything, which, I mean, it's still a hook. I mean, it's still like building anticipation and keeping you watching past that like 3-second mark where Instagram counts it as a view. After that, after like it passes in front of the camera, you really, I really kind of like wanted something else to happen. Either like, you know, it goes through the blobs, and, you know, the camera goes through the blobs, kind of like brings you as part of the creature for a second or something. Or, you know, something a little bit more engaging than just passing in front of the camera and then you kind of stare at a wall. To continue with the virality critique, there's definitely like minor details here and there that you notice after watching it after the second or third time, which is really important. And overall, it's a satisfying video to watch, and it got near 100,000 views on Esteban's account, which he has a pretty significant audience, so that's to be expected. So overall, great piece, and thank you so much, Esteban, for sharing it. So the third and final piece we're going to be reviewing today is by Lion Colony. There's a lot of really interesting experimental pieces that are on Lion Colony's feed, so be sure to check them out. The one piece in particular that we're going to be reviewing today is called Honeycomb. And it's one of my favorite new pieces from Lion Colony, and it's like just super satisfying and kind of visceral to watch, and I just love it. So let's jump into the review. So point number 1, creativity. Is this following a particular trend? I'd say this follows along the lines of like the typical like satisfying videos. However, I haven't quite seen like one of those kinds of videos like this. So this definitely like is probably something that could exist in the real world. But for it to like act like it is here, it must have been, it like just only has to be simulated. That, and there's like all these like little minor details that you notice. There's like the little gummy bear characters that he uses in this animation that he uses typically in a lot of his other animations. So it's definitely like a signature mark for Lion Colony. So number 2 on our list is the aesthetics and relevancy of this piece to the overall body of work from Lion Colony. And I definitely think this piece fits right in with Lion Colony's body of work. And it's definitely something that Lion Colony's audience would kind of come to expect to see, and it wouldn't throw them off. Number 3 on our list is artistic quality. The use of like lighting, texturing, detail, and color. Colors are definitely there. They're definitely muted. Has this like a little bit clinical look to it with like you know, the creamy whites and you know, the really subtle like mint color of the bears and the light pink characteristic of the foam that comes out. Definitely like subtle on the color scheme there, but extremely satisfying nonetheless. Lighting, you can tell there's definitely like a primary light coming from the top right and then secondary light coming from the bottom left, like underneath the little honeycomb object. So there's definitely some dynamic lighting and some like nice shadows that's happening. The video does look like it's intended to be a loop, but there is a cut. There's a break where like, you know, it just kind of repeats, which is, in my opinion, just like it could be something that could be improved. But overall, it's not something that would stop me from watching the video 100 times. Number 4 on our list is composition. In terms of composition, I love how the honeycomb is at like a sort of like more of an oblique angle. It's not perfectly 45 degrees. So it definitely is like a little bit more dynamic, and the front focus of the shot is the goo itself coming out of the honeycomb. So that's definitely like the subject at hand. That's like what you pay attention to, the first thing that you see when you look at the video. Okay, number 5 is video quality and the use of time. Use of time is like nice and slow and subtle, and it kind of just like really drags you through it. If it was a little faster, it would be too much. It could have been like maybe a little slower, and like that the foam could have like really like kind of like oozed out and coagulated, like maybe like a little bit bigger to be like the focus of the image. But I think the fact that it is like super dynamic and it feels really realistic. So I think it's probably definitely a good use of time. And of course the composition is like, it's well balanced. There's definitely like a good use of negative space in the image. You see some like information happening in the background, these like kind of like soft pillowy objects that kind of like go behind the honeycomb and lend like a pretty engaging and interesting background, rather than it having just be like a flat color or something. Okay, number 6 on our list is software. The analysis of software here looks like he used Houdini for the actual like particle sim effect, and then the rest of it was built in Cinema 4D, which is definitely a good use of the tool set. I think you could probably accomplish all of it in Cinema 4D or all of it in Houdini, but again, Houdini's modeling tools, you know, if you're not used to it, then you know, it's more of a VFX tool anyway, so it's a lot of artists use both Houdini and Cinema 4D. Okay, number 7 on our list, sound design. I think the sound design is exceptionally good in this video. You get the little bee buzzing, and there's like some birds chirping, and so it takes this like really clinical, like kind of stark environment that's like, you know, around the honeycomb, and like the playfulness of the colors, and then the sound like really brings like this sort of like playful quality to it, which is really important. I mean, the sound could be 50% of the entire video. It could be more than the video, you know, sometimes. So the sound design is really important. And in this case, you know, it has like this sort of visceral quality of the goo coming out, the little particle goo, and you can really hear the sort of like ambiance of like the character of the atmosphere that he was trying to portray in this piece. So great job with the sound design. And number 8, our last and final point on our review here, is the virality critique. What is the hook? I think the hook really is like, as the goo starts to come out, and then you like really look at the finer details of the sim, you notice eventually that you notice after the second or third time a lot of other details. You notice the little bears on the side of the honeycomb, which is like one of the, you know, like signature like little model elements that that Lion King puts in to a lot of his animations. And then you begin to notice that there is a small inflection of detail in the where the blade creases over the top of the honeycomb. So the honeycomb itself is made out of this like silicone-like material, which definitely it could have just been, you know, just like a regular, you know, like model element that the blade was like creasing over the top of, and it wouldn't have been as good. So this was definitely like an extra effort on his part to make the honeycomb be this like silicone-like substance. You can really see that sort of, you know, like that the process of it like screeding out the, you know, the particle goo. It just makes for such more like dynamic and interesting video. What could have been done a little bit differently is the loop itself could have been seamless. There is a basically like a stop and end point to the loop, where you could tell that it like, you know, stops and starts. But overall, exceptional job, and thank you so much, Lion Colony, for sharing that with us. All right, everyone, this is the end of the first video of the Viral Art Review series. I hope you liked it. If you did like the video, please smash the like button and subscribe for more. If you liked it, or if you have any criticism of the video, what could be done a little bit better, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. And okay, everyone, see you in the next video, and have a good one.